My wife classified me as a friend and said she felt disgusted after we spent the night together, so I started acting extremely cold towards her. She completely lost her temper. My wife and I recently started couples therapy, and during one of the sessions she confessed to me that she no longer loved me and only saw me as her best friend. She said that she only loved me platonically, and that was one of the main reasons why she refused to sleep with me for the last 3 years. Later that day, she also said that she had built up a lot of resentment towards me. She thinks it is because I spend more time with our children than with her, and because of the resentment, she has even started thinking about other men. I had no idea how to proceed until one night she came home drunk and begged for sex. At first I refused, but she insisted until I gave in. The next morning she woke up and said she was disgusted with herself. She reiterated that she saw me as her best friend and had a lifelong rule of never sleeping with friends. That same day we had a long, heartfelt conversation in which she said all she wanted was just companionship, which basically meant our dynamic of living together and co-parenting. I asked her what I could do, or what about me was so unattractive or undesirable. Her answer was, "I don't know." She stated that she loves me, but that is not the same, that she has felt disconnected for years, and that our marriage is too much work. Her focus is only on the kids now, and that me being involved in co-parenting the kids is important to her. I am confused, frustrated, and I don't know what to do at this point. Update. One of the main things that was bothering me was the word resentment, and it really ate away at me inside knowing that my wife is constantly telling me that she doesn't know why she is resentful or doesn't know why it is affecting her, emotionally, mentally. I brought it up again with our therapist and reopened the conversation about how we've been married for so long, 15 years of marriage, and since we were 14, our long history of growing up, and how having kids at 19 has changed the trajectory of our lives so much. We've been through a lot of poverty and a lot of hardship along the way, and we've basically had no social life for the last 10 years because we've been too busy raising kids. 2 kids, now ages 12 and 14. The therapist asked my wife a lot of questions about her feelings about this, and 90% of the answers were very child-oriented. It definitely seemed like she was afraid to say yes. It sucked because she would feel guilty or ashamed because it would mean she regretted having kids. I mentioned this in a session, and the therapist encouraged her to look at it outside of the lens of motherhood and try to look at it a little more selfishly and individually. And that was very sobering. My wife mentioned that she was really upset about the fact that we were missing out on a lot of things in life. She also said clearly, "I don't think I've missed out on other partners or dates or parties, but I've definitely lost all my friends." That was huge because one of the big issues that was causing tension in our lives was how disconnected and isolated we were. I reminded her that it is important to have good friends and to make time for yourself and your friends. We have had many conversations over the last 3+ years about friends and how important it is to have them in your life, especially when you have similar peers who can help in many areas of life where we may not have experience, as well as just for fun. This has always been something that my wife has avoided, even though she has always been someone who needs that external stimulation. The main reason for her refusal to invest in friends or even herself has always been because of her children. As I mentioned earlier, 90% of the responses related to children in some way or another. At this point in our session, I began to sense that there was a common cause for many of her frustrations and problems: children. So I just asked her, "Do you think you're angry at me because I'm responsible for these kids in the sense that I got you pregnant so early? I wasn't ready?" But she said she was angry at me for that. She also said that she knew it was unreasonable because it takes 2 to tango. I felt like that was progress because it gave us something to work on and help ease some of that burden. So we agreed to invest more time in developing good friendships both together and individually. Towards the end of the session, we started discussing what specific actions we would take after this session. At this point, things were still very ambiguous and foggy about the outcome. I was very direct and very open in asking my wife what her plan was for the future. She started saying essentially the same thing, that she had no desire to be intimate with me at the moment, and that she loved me immensely and felt bad for not being there for me. I also mentioned the short period of partner swapping, which, for the 50th time, she said was not a problem. I agree with her on this. It was a mechanical approach to solving a problem that was very much non-existent. When we tried it, we both really had no problem with it. We know it happened, we tried it, and mutually stopped and turned the page. I also mentioned other life events that could be causing resentment, and frankly, we never got anywhere with regards to the root of the resentment, which was discouraging. I then essentially expressed to my wife that I would not accept this arrangement. I told her that I had truly done everything I could, and that this issue had truly reached a point where it had nothing to do with me, and did not require anything from me that I was not currently doing. I was very direct, and said that I would not accept this dynamic, and that I needed someone who was actively involved in our marriage, working on solutions, and was very interested in maintaining active closeness and intimacy. I expressed that I was not going to be a convenience and that there was more to life than being roommates and co-parents. I let her know that I loved her dearly and that I wanted this to work out for the best. I also told her that I was fully committed to this marriage as long as she was, and that if she wasn't, that was okay, but I would not be a part of something where those efforts were not reciprocated. I told her that I had no plans to leave and I didn't want a divorce, but I made it clear that if this dynamic continued, divorce would be the only outcome. Of course, there were tears, and it was a very dark and sad end to the session. Still, nothing was said, and I left very disappointed and very determined to start working on the 180 as soon as we left the room. It's painful and very difficult because much of the 180 requires you to be very brief, cold, and transactional. The saddest part is the realization that this dynamic is already very cold and transactional. Here's where it gets really interesting. I started working on implementing a lot of the 180 recommendations that same day. I told my wife that, hey, things are going to be a little different going forward. I'm going to respect her roommate and co-parent dynamic without judgment, and that there should be no question that I'm not happy here and will never be okay with it. But I'm done working on it if she's not going to work on it. She agreed and went to bed. I started building distance and started essentially focusing on myself, very briefly and transactionally. She asked for help with some of her personal stuff, which I refused, and it really shocked her. She was upset, saying I was being petty. I explained to her that she was now in full charge of her own life and her own problems. We didn't talk all day, and only spoke when necessary. A few days later I continue this and she is very visibly upset and stressed. Usually I respond to this with gestures of help or support, but this time I didn't. That night she cried, telling me that she was stressed and thought there was something wrong with me because I was indifferent. I just listened. Then I told her that this was the dynamic she suggested and that I was just like her, taking care of myself and focusing on myself. I'm not going to lie, it was very difficult for me to be cold and distant because, as I mentioned, I love her and would like to hold her and love her. However, I know it's a bit manipulative to get her way and still keep me in the friend zone, so I've stayed the course. We're approaching the week of this 180, and let's just say there's been a lot of change on her end. I think she's starting to realize there's more to me than just friends and co-parents. A few days ago, I sent her a text message essentially detailing bills and splitting financial responsibility 50-50, and she lost her cool. She basically told me it was completely unexpected, to which I responded, "Hey, friends stay 50-50, and as your friend, I expect no less." It was very sobering, because it gave me a glimpse of how I was truly being taken for granted, and how much. Her comfort level and convenience at my expense was truly being ignored. I persisted anyway, and basically told her that this was the new dynamic she wanted, and that it was still a deal, because she would have to be 100% if she was on her own. I will end with this. While the 180 works in many different areas, I am still very sad about the overall situation. There were a lot of sobering statements and realizations made that were hard to come by. It also brought forth new energy and effort on her part as well. She is definitely trying to talk to me more often, and while it is hard to say no, I am hopeful that if things improve, it will continue. I have also noticed that she is taking more time for herself outside of being a mom, which is important because she has basically neglected herself for years. I am so happy to see her being more like herself. My hope is that as we work on ourselves, the marriage will improve. At this point, there is really no telling where this will go. We are very kind and friendly even to this day, and that is a very good sign. Boundaries have been set and expectations are very clear, and I feel that no matter the outcome, I will be at peace with everything that has been done. We will continue couples therapy until we either rekindle our marriage or get a divorce. I feel like having that impartial third party really helps as a witness and as a guide. No matter what happens, I will always love my wife, but I will not participate in a marriage without intimacy because we both deserve better. Update 2. We are almost 9 weeks into the 180 method I mentioned, and it has started to elicit positive reactions from my wife. So much has changed, and it seems to be for the better. Last Memorial Day weekend, my wife asked me if I wanted to go out for coffee because she wanted to talk to me about something. This was a big deal because I can't remember the last time my wife asked to talk to me about something important. I have to admit that I was very nervous and worried about what it could be, and my mind was racing with a lot of scenarios of what it could be. Of course, I agreed, and we set aside time to talk about it at a local coffee shop away from the kids. The conversation was very constructive. There was a lot of insightful information about myself that helped me better understand where she was in life, both emotionally and mentally. We summarized the main issues we were facing and she asked me for help. This is something new, and I can't tell you how happy I was to hear something so sincere from my wife, who has been absent for the past 3+ years. So after she shared all of her thoughts, I came up with a plan that I felt was right for us. It was something I'd been thinking about for the past few weeks, and I planned to bring it up in a few months if I noticed things weren't getting better. This day seemed like a good time to share it, since it went hand in hand with what she had been talking about, and also related to the help she had asked me for. I started by first acknowledging her feelings and her concerns. I told her that they were valid, and that what she was feeling was personal to her, and that I cared that she felt that way because I didn't like the idea of her being sad or depressed. I also told her that my goal is still and always will be for us to reconcile and be happy together like we promised each other, and that my love for her is as strong, if not stronger, than it was on our wedding day. I continued the conversation by telling her how I feel about the whole situation and how it affects me every day. I also clarified some of the things she said she was feeling because I have been very distant and monotonous lately. I explained to her that I try very hard to protect my feelings and emotions from rejection and neglect, and that it is not personal. It is just me protecting myself because I cannot control her. I can only control myself. This was the perfect segue into the heart of this approach, which is all about self-responsibility. I told her that for a long time, I'd always worked hard to make her happy and do things I knew she liked or wanted. But I was always met with rejection and disappointment, which caused me a lot of stress. I explained to her that I had to change for myself. After all, I can only control myself and make the changes I want for myself. I mentioned how I had begun to implement new habits and routines that had helped me while still managing all of our shared responsibilities, including parenting, finances, and daily life. I explained that the goal was to continue to improve myself as a husband and father, learn more, and be healthier. She was very receptive to this. She told me that she saw what I was doing and was proud of the changes she was seeing. She also told me that she was beginning to realize that she felt left behind and that many of the things that had negatively affected her were her own fault. By the end of the conversation, which lasted about 3 hours, there was a very upbeat, reconciling spirit in the room. I told her that my goal was to eventually make this work, but I made it very clear that I was not going to live in the current circumstances. So here's what we established. We are responsible for our own happiness. The key here is that she is not responsible for making me happy, and vice versa. We both have to find what that personal plan looks like individually. We are also both encouraged to include each other in these steps if we wish, but we are not required to. We are in control of our own individual lives and our own path. This means that we are both responsible for finding the resources we need to grow, change, and heal. We can certainly help each other when asked for help, but unsolicited advice or help will not be given. We are responsible for communication. This ensures that nothing is left unsaid. If it has never been brought up or discussed, it never happened. We are not mind readers, and we need to take responsibility when we are not communicating. Make a list of needs and wants. This gives us both clear direction on how to meet each other's needs. It also gives us choices about what we want to do, compromise on, or refuse to do. This list will also not serve as an accountability checklist. We made it clear that we would not bring up this list for the purpose of argument, and it was up to the other person to use the list as a tool for growth, transparency, or clarification. We came to the conclusion that it was up to us to decide whether we would be happy doing these things for ourselves because we cared, rather than just checking a box. This was critical to establishing long-term habits rather than short-term bandages because you can't force someone to change or do something they don't think is important. We also set a deadline, Memorial Day, 2025. At the end of the conversation, we came to a conclusion, setting Memorial Day 2025 as a deadline to evaluate our lives and our progress. We agreed that we would do so with the clear understanding that we would independently decide whether we were happy here. If we decided we were not happy, we would divorce. We would also both take full responsibility for what happened should we divorce. For example, if needs were not met, that would mean my partner chose not to meet them. This places full responsibility on each of us. The whole process requires that if needs are not being met, the next question should be, have we done everything to solve this problem? If so, we will have a clear conscience about what happened, and we will know that we have exhausted all options. However, if we have not done everything to solve the problem, it will mean that the problem was not important enough to you, or you did not care enough to meet these needs. This applies to both, in any area. As with everything else, we have established that the primary motivator for change must be ourselves. And if we do this, we in turn will begin to see beneficial changes in each other. The goal is to ensure that everything we do for each other to meet each other's needs is done, because we want to do it for our spouse, not because he or she asked. It was done because I know it makes him or her happy, and I love to see them happy. I found it important to tell her that we no longer have to do anything for each other. Now it's more like, I want to do these things for each other. Ultimately, I found the conversation to be very positive and productive. Many tears were shed and many hugs ensued. I know that doesn't mean or guarantee anything, however. This has never happened before, and I can honestly attribute it to the 180 method. I have decided that I will end this and stay away from this method going forward as the plan has now changed. I plan to fully commit to not only myself and my growth, but also to working on her needs and desires because I want her to be happy with me. She has said and agreed that she will do the same for herself. We have agreed that we will help and support each other wherever we ask, and that we will approach this as a team. Since today, one of the biggest changes I have noticed is her commitment to therapy and mental health. She is taking antidepressants, which are helping her. She is also more confident and in a much better mood more often. We have started to explore more ways to be intimate in different areas such as physical touch and words of affirmation.